I know this thing is on, and I know that you can hear me. Nursing and healthcare needs advocates and activism. So, what are you waiting for? Today, we're diving into a conversation that sits at the very heart of what we do and why we do it, and why it's becoming harder than ever to stay. In 2025, the reality for healthcare workers is staggering. Recent data shows that nearly 50% of US physicians and over 65% of nurses report symptoms of high level burnout, ranging from emotional exhaustion to a complete sense of detachment. We work in a culture where 67% of bedside nurses report they lack time to provide empathy to their patients in need, and where 1 in 3 healthcare professionals are planning on leaving their roles within the next 2 years. In this system, self care is often treated as a luxury, yet we know that burnout is the leading driver of medical errors and personal health crises. Our guest today, Dr. William Berk, as a veteran ER doctor and professor of medicine, he lived in the unspoken rule that healthcare workers must never prioritize themselves. But after decades of holding space for the trauma of thousands, Dr. Berk faced a life altering aortic aneurysm that forced him to confront a difficult truth. You cannot heal others if you are a stranger to yourself. Dr. Berk is the creator of the Human Curriculum, a framework of finding the self amidst the grit of clinical practice. Today, he joins us from India, where he has transitioned from fixing bodies to guiding souls as an IFS therapist and meditation guide. We're going to talk about the radical act of self-compassion, the courage it takes to sit in difficult moments, and what happens when a doctor finally decides to put on his own oxygen mask first. Welcome, Dr. Berk, to the show. Welcome, Will, to the show. Thank you so much for joining me on the Greeners podcast. It's so crazy how I came across your page. I just saw that you were in emergency medicine and then you were off to India, but I don't want to give it all away because I think it's a great story for the listeners I have here. So maybe before we get started, how about you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of, what led you into some of the work that you're doing before you left to go to India?
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, this is a beautiful synchronistic connection, and I've been enjoying your work these past few days. Here from India, and yeah, there's a lot that runs into this. It's probably the best place to start. I graduated medical school at Brown University in the US in 2016. I did my residency training at Mount Sinai in New York City, 4-year emergency medicine residency that finished in 2020 around COVID. Yeah, I think that's really where the journey began. I finished my last year of residency training during COVID, and that was
Right.
kind of a wild time to be an ER doctor in New York City. And I was working, I did most of that time in some of the public hospitals in the borough of Queens. And Queens is one of the most diverse places in the world. And I was working at the sort of the big trauma center there. And so
Yeah, for sure.
it was wild. I mean, we ran out of body bags early. We had unrefrigerated morgue trucks. It felt like the apocalypse. I mean, it felt like I was drafted into a war that I never imagined joining. And I think emotionally I spiraled a little bit. I didn't have the resources to deal with the volume of pain and trauma that was happening. And so when I graduated medical school, I thought maybe I could find comfort or safety in money or in jobs or in success. And so I got like I got like 2.5 jobs.
2.5 jobs,
Yeah, two
geez.
and a half. Well, there were 2 jobs, and then I got one at this place called City MD, which is like an urgent care in the States. I was just doing COVID tests over and over again, like 20 an hour.
Wow.
Anyway, I really ran myself ragged and really tried to like get as much money as I could. And then I got kind of like crazy about it. And then I lost it all on crypto. And this was kind of
Wow.
a blessing. Like I kind of just was like, oh my gosh, like there really is no safety in this. There's no safety in these external things that I can kind of try to accumulate. Around that time, I narrowed all of my jobs into a single job where I was doing academics, teaching at Mount Sinai Medical School, and I took a faculty position and really redoubled my meditation work. I was raised meditating, and I got really much more deeply into it after I kind of realized that all the outside accumulation, all the cool cars and I never got a cool car. I just mean to say that like all the money, all the status, all the friends, all the things that I might try to accumulate in the outside world. So I started teaching meditation and guiding meditation for my staff and doing burnout prevention programs for the hospital system, really giving people opportunities to talk about their trauma or talk about what were some of the persistent feelings that came up for them during that time. I think so many of us like just kind of pulled our boots up and did it. Really pushed down a lot of what it meant to be walking into an environment where people were dying around us and we didn't know if we were safe. And so giving people the opportunities to talk about that in an open way, in a way that wasn't maybe like with their boss or in a structured way. So started facilitating meditation, really into that. And then I started facilitating more meditation just around New York City. And then I started facilitating psychedelic meditations.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know
Like psilocybin?
no, well, with ketamine,
Ketamine.
been doing some trainings and some research around psilocybin.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen any of the research around psychedelics for mental health, but
I've seen.
some of it's pretty beautiful. It was
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
6 doses of ketamine can produce 80% reductions in anxiety and depression. In acute suicidality, 1 dose of dissociative ketamine can produce a 50% reduction in psych admissions. The military is using it for trauma imprinting. So the only time I ever did this, I worked nights for 3 or 4 years in
Right.
the ER, and we had a case where a MTA, one of the subway conductors, hit someone who jumped in front of the tracks,
Dear. Yeah.
and he came in just absolutely crushed, distraught, and like just feeling the weight of that,
Right.
and 1 dose of ketamine, which is which maybe there are mores about it. It's something we use in the ER on an almost daily basis. And it really helped him like take some really compassionate space from the anxiety, from the pain of what had just happened, and allowed him to be with, I guess, when he came back, allowed him to be with it with that space intact.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, there have been some beautiful research around that as well. So started to get curious with that, and then started working with some ketamine clinics in the city, helping people kind of create compassionate space with their thoughts and emotions. Help
Wow.
people get in touch with things that they may have buried, but I don't know if you can relate to this, but like sometimes you feel like you've I've put that all in my past, but maybe it continues to come up in your
To
life
say
here.
this is a timely conversation.
Yeah, is it? Why do you say that?
Maybe, yeah, I would think so. Like, I mean, oh gosh, we're not going to get into like the particulars, but yeah, no, I would say that there have been moments within my own life and space, particularly just currently now. Like, my dad is actually dying of cancer.
Mm.
He has acute myeloid leukemia, and they literally last week gave him, I think it was, they said like 6 months on experimental treatment, potentially like up to 6 months. So that was kind of a new thing. And I think that as like, a healthcare provider, as a nurse, and I'll bounce it back to you because I don't want to talk too much about myself.
No, that's
But
okay.
I think as healthcare providers, we are taught really to take care of others. Like our whole job and being is really surrounded making sure that someone else is okay. And in my own journey, that was very true. I was a labor and delivery nurse. I worked in quality improvement in the emergency department. It was always about making sure that someone else was okay. And then it dawned on me that I was definitely not okay. And I think it takes a lot. I don't want to say courage because it's not that. It takes, and it's not even just about self actualization, but it does take some time through, conversations and therapy and really, destigmatizing mental health to come to a realization that you need help and support. And I would say that over the last, I don't know, over the last couple weeks, it's been very, very challenging. Like my podcast for me is my catharsis, being able to talk to other people, sharing experiences. So that's why I was like, oh, this might be a very timely conversation because one of the things that I'm horrible at is meditation. Like I sit with my thoughts for 5 minutes. I'm like, that is more than enough. I just do not need to do that. And I know I'm working up to, being able to sit with myself for longer periods of time. But yeah, no, I would say that it's important that as healthcare providers we do go down this path because like you said, 2019 through to I'd say like 2021, 2022 was a very challenging time for a lot of healthcare providers, for nurses, for physicians. Actually, I was a part of a series on W5. It's kind of like, I guess it would be like, I don't know, your maybe 50/50 or whatever documentary series that you guys have out there about mental health because we had a nurse that died by suicide. And it was very traumatic for myself and a lot of my colleagues. And we never talk about that kind of stuff in nursing. Like it just doesn't come up. We talk about having debriefs, but we like never have them. I remember going down to the emergency department during COVID to be like, hey, there's a lot of stuff that's happening. I was doing morbidity and mortality, and it's just, there wasn't space. And I'm amazed to hear that you created space for people to feel safe to have these types of conversations. I would say that that would be very abnormal. I'm going to bounce it back to you. How did people perceive, and were people open to having those conversations? Because I would think that that would be, it is a very important thing, but I think maybe some people would have been shocked by it. How did nurses perceive or other healthcare team members perceive when you came to them and saying, hey, we're all going through this. How about we talk about it?
Yeah. Well, first, just thank you for sharing, Amy. I'm sorry about your father. Yeah. Yeah. I think, we as a profession, I think we're all very comfortable pointing outwards. Like, how can I be compassionate with you? And really, really uncomfortable bringing it back to us. I know myself, like the thought of an emotion was something that I wanted to get over, negate, escape, distract from. I had a million tools to turn away from an emotion, but I didn't have a single tool for being with an emotion. And so when staff, yeah, were presented with, hey, we're gonna have lunch. We're gonna do some meditation. We're gonna do some breathing. We're gonna talk about some stuff. And maybe it was only 3 or 5% of people actually jumped in, but even then, you create an atmosphere that says it's okay not to be okay, and that's not, when you're taking care of someone acutely, it's not okay not to be okay. And the system is so fast paced and there's no space to just be like, wow, that really hit me hard. What are the tools that I have to be with myself in a safe way? And so that kind of leads me to what I'm doing now, which has evolved considerably, but I see sort of as a society, and this is a generalization, but I feel like we struggle with two big things. And the first is that I myself and people around me, I think we struggle with a really, really negative self-talk, like a really judgmental, critical, rough inner narrative that may have been somewhat helpful at some point or some stage to, I don't know, but at this point is something for most people that keeps us down, is like really, we really beat ourselves up, and it's difficult to, yeah, it's difficult to succeed when you've got like a bully in your head. And the second is that we don't have tools to be with our emotions, to process our emotions, to say like, wow, I'm feeling really deeply sad, or I'm really scared right now. What is or how do I say this? How do I create an environment within myself where I can feel something and process it such that I can continue to move on with my life? And so, yeah, so I'm teaching like a 6-week course on first, creating a really positive inner landscape. And second, how to be with our emotions, learn from them, and let them move through us. And that was all kind of a product of what I had been doing in the ER with my staff, and yeah,
So would you say, so would that be the human curriculum that you were kind of
yeah, yeah,
teaching
yeah,
them?
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so we called it the human curriculum just because it's kind of like, what are the tools for these baseline tools for being human in this human world that I wish I had learned when I was a little kid? Like, how do I look in the mirror and say, like, wow, I love you. You're really worthy of love. Or I forgive you, or I celebrate you, instead of like, you know, beating myself up at every juncture. Um,
Yeah, no, I completely hear what you're saying, and I think in healthcare that's so needed. I was gonna say, like, are you sure you want to be in India? Like, American men need you.
oh
I
my
think
God.
there's a lot of men that need to
Oh,
deal with their emotions. Like, I think that's kind of like one of the biggest problems that we're seeing, that in terms of some of the negativity, in terms of people understanding what compassion is. And I always say to people, and I always remind people, there's empathy, being able to put yourself in one person's shoes, or to say, like, I think I might understand what it might to be in that position. But compassion takes it one step further. It's about how to alleviate suffering, how to alleviate someone else's pain. And I feel that particularly in healthcare, we're really removed. Like, we are happy to help treat using medicines or various different things. But again, just circling it back to this whole, like, alleviating pain from we don't do a very good job. Would there be like one specific thing? So I know you mentioned, like, we're really hard on ourselves when it comes to self talk, which I would definitely agree with. I think that particularly I'd say, like, in my realm right now, a lot of imposter syndrome just around
mm,
even having these conversations. So, like, next week I'm going to, like, this political rally where I'm speaking with, like, CEOs and executives. I'm like, why should I be there? Why did they invite me? And I know there's a lot of women that suffer from imposter syndrome, and you get that negative self-talk. And then just being able to be open. I'd say, maybe I'm biased, that women might tend to do this a little bit better. But again, just like, what would be like one tip to just say, hey, I'm struggling today? How might you be able to position someone, or just give them that space to say that it's okay to, sit in some of those thoughts that might be dark, and say, you know what, you can kind of maybe come out on the other end. Like, what are your thoughts there?
yeah. I mean, you brought up a lot of stuff there. I think like around men and their emotions. Like I was raised with like the boys don't cry kind of like it's
I
weak.
don't think it was just you. I think there was a lot of men raised that way.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And it's really, as a society, I think, coming back to bite us. In the healthcare field, I think anywhere, we can only feel outwardly to the degree that we're able to feel inwardly. So my ability to be present with people's pain, to love them in whatever expression they want to bring through, is hugely expanded over these past few years because I'm able to be with my own sadness, my own grief, my own pain in a way that I wasn't able to, or I never learned how to be with. Understandably. I mean, as a society, we're just so bombarded with ways to placate, distract, and cover up. And so, yeah, I mean, the one takeaway I would just say is that instead of maybe imagining our thoughts, emotions, and feelings as things to get over, or maybe things that are coming up to punish us, things to like push away, recognize them for what they are. And what they are, I believe, is they are past versions of ourselves that are coming into the present to inform us or give us a message. Let's say, I feel like it's simple conditioning. Like if you were hurt in the past, a memory or feeling will come up when you find yourself in a similar situation. Let's say, let's say yelling in the past was associated with chaos or pain. Every time there's yelling in the present, you might feel some anxiety around it, or some like, I need to get out of here, some sadness or fear. In the same way, like if you found that Netflix made you feel better when you were sad, you'll continue to go to the Netflix every time you feel that way.
Right.
And the sadness will just be waiting for you on the other side. And so instead of seeing these thoughts of emotions as things that are here to punish us, seeing them as like, okay, this is some part of me that found some success in this way. And it's coming forward just to inform me of this. Once you can be with that emotion, recognize it, give it some compassion, give yourself some compassion, forgiveness, then you can be with that. And I don't know if you're like, there's a very like early spiritual principle that's whatever's within is also what's outside. So with as within, so without.
Okay.
And that just says like, once you can be with yourself, once you can open up your own internal landscape, the whole world begins to open up and be a little bit more bright and sunny.
Yeah, I think we should need to like put this on through the airwaves right now because there's a
Yeah.
lot of tension around the world. And I
Mm.
think that, I think probably one of the biggest issues is people don't sit with themselves. They don't take the time to critically analyze or understand the emotions that they might have. And these are some of the things I do in relation to like like let's say it was even like bias training. It's just like, well, why might you have had that thought about that individual? Or, where did that thought come from? Is that a fact? Is that a reality? And it's just it's asking people to do something that probably a lot of people haven't done before. And that introspection is really hard for someone to look critically at themselves in a mirror and say, not necessarily what's wrong with me, because I don't think that's the case, but it's just like, how do I understand this person better? And I talked about it with another psychologist. She was talking about something called fight languages. And then I spoke with another individual and they were talking about like attachment styles. And it was kind of similar to what you were saying in terms of how that person might respond to, a particular stimuli, whether it was, feeling sad while watching Netflix or whatever the case may be. But just being able to, sit with yourself. And I think for in healthcare, that doesn't happen very often. And I talked to all of my friends and colleagues, and I was just like, it will catch up. And again, I think life is one of those things where I'm just like, I know it sounds late and cliche. We're just like, you only have one life to live. But I think it's important to make the best of the time that we have here because I feel like it is short. And I feel like, again, in healthcare, we just give so much, but we don't take that time to really like, and we're not taught to take that time, but it's so critically important. I kind of want to circle it back to a little bit of challenges, and this is something that you might have not touched on, but in terms of your human curriculum, did something teach you about wanting to live a little bit? I was digging a little bit and noticed that you came upon a strange diagnosis of within yourself. Is that okay that we can
This
share
is
that
the
story?
craziest story. Yeah, yeah. I'd love to talk
It's
about.
crazy. I was just like, wow, that's wild.
It was so crazy. So in May of 2024, in the morning, I'm teaching ultrasound echocardiogram to a bunch of my med students and residents. And I find that I have a pretty massive proximal aortic aneurysm. I
What?
saw some aortic regurgitation and yeah, and like looked up on my aorta and it's like, is this big? And I brought it to a cardiologist and the cardiologist was like, yeah, this is big. Anyway, they're like, here's some labetalol. Don't
Yeah.
do anything that's going to raise your blood pressure. And I'm like, do you know what I do for a living?
Yeah, right?
I was like, this plan is not great. And so I brought it to a cardiothoracic surgeon. And 2 weeks later, I had like a reconstructive open heart surgery. And at the time of the surgery, they were saying that had I not found this on myself, I would have had 3 to 12 months before it ruptured or dissected.
That's
Um,
wild.
yeah, which was, I mean, like the mortality, some of that is 100%. So, I'm still not sure where I settle with like the higher power stuff or the, fate, but that just felt so ridiculous that
Right.
I think it really like softened my trust, at least that I was held in some way. And again, like with anything, you can meet it with gratitude or you can meet it with resentment.
Right.
Like I had this massive open heart surgery and it took me like, weeks to months to get better. And like I was fainting like months out, but I met it all with like such gratitude that at no point was it like depressing.
Wow.
Yeah. And death is part of our lives. I think, as healthcare providers, we're so maybe a little bit more comfortable with what it means to die. But at least in the general public, or at least when you point that inwards, like our own mortality is sneaking up. And, it was really powerful for me to face that in myself. Yeah, I did like a lot of practices, a lot of like just what do I want to like if I'm going to step through a portal where my heart is going to be stopped for 4 hours, my chest is going to be cut open and like all this stuff. Like, what do I want to take with me? What do I want to leave behind on the other side of this portal? And a lot of that was like these negative patterns and this self-judgment and like the always looking for the next thing and the always grasping for like, what's going to make me happy. Yeah, I don't know. At least in my doctor mates, like we push ourselves really hard and like, why? I, like who for what? Like, there's always more people to help, of course, but you know, like that will always be the case. I think that's the nature of this world. And so do you have to put yourself on the chopping block every day? And I think it's actually to everyone's detriment in some way. So yeah, so I got weird open heart surgery last.
Yeah, no, when I read that story, I was blown away because I was just like, perusing and I was like, "Oh, look, it looks like he had surgery." And I was like, "Well, that is life changing, just knowing the diagnosis, you finding it on yourself, and just
Yeah.
wondering like how you were able to deal with it." And it sounds like it was a journey, right? And I think that, not everyone would be able to deal with it that way. And I think again, that probably speaks to just some of your not I don't want to say how you've conditioned yourself, but how you're understanding your viewpoints of the world. And I think that people can take away learning how to navigate a very challenging situation. And I think that, talking about again, like you mentioned, the concept of death. Again, I worked in quality improvement in the emergency department during the pandemic. So it was just a lot of death. And I think that, I wouldn't say that there isn't a healthy respect or fear of it, but I think that we just have a better understanding. And I think the general public doesn't. I had a nurse, actually a hospice nurse, on a couple weeks ago where we were talking about, death and dying and how it can be such a beautiful process. And just the fact that people, because there's so much fear surrounding it, that it can become this really awful thing when it really shouldn't be. And I think that, we don't know what's on either side. And I think my nurse friend called it the woo woo stuff, just being like, okay, we have these things that happen in our life, but it's about like, what can we take from it? And I think that you kind of beautifully summed it up about, like what's on the other side. And, even talking about just, why do we grind so hard? Essentially, that's kind of what it is. And I think that, you talked about leaving it all behind, and you actually did,
Well,
right?
so interesting that you mentioned a hospice nurse. Like in the ER, we take such an opposite approach. Like birth and death are just seen as like these routine things. It's like you finish a code, you take 10 seconds of silence, and then you're like,
On to
next.
the
Like
next.
that
Yeah.
took too long, or like, oh, now I have more, things to do. We don't like take time to really feel what it is to have just ushered someone through this life on either side. I mean, like a birth, the same way. We treat it all so mechanically. And that really reflects back to us. Like, and then we treat ourselves so mechanically. I think throughout residency, I was like, I am a mind with a rope, like with like a meat robot body.
Yeah. Yes.
And like, as long as I give my meat robot enough sleep, water, and nutrients, I can continue to mind this thing. And it's like, whoa, if you continue to treat yourself like that, no wonder you're going to get burnt out. No wonder you're going to lose your humanity. And I think, I think there's a lot of people in medicine that really see themselves both as a problem to be solved and see their patients as another problem to be solved or another obstacle to overcome, and not as like, wow, this is a soul. This is a seed that could sprout into the most unbelievable plant, just like, all of it. I think there's practices to like give gratitude or give celebration for little moments, or to recognize that, yeah, we're doing something kind of magical here, kind of whimsical in this life. And how do we recognize that? How do we bring ourselves back to that?
I agree, and I think that we in healthcare need to learn how to slow down. Like it is a
Mm,
machine. It is, and
yeah.
it's designed that way, particularly in the US. I'd say that it's even more so of a machine there.
Yeah.
And we have to move away from that model. It doesn't work for patients and families really, and it doesn't work for the healthcare worker because, a lot of my friends I see they kind of we'd have this like little conversation where it's like, "Oh yeah, 65 and we'll just finally be settling up." And I'm like, "That's no way to live." And that's why I'm actually not even at the bedside anymore because I said that's not how I want to do things. And I wanted to explore healthcare in a very different way through having conversations. Um, but again, I think it's just we are so commoditized. Like everything is about capital or, productivity. And I think we really need to look at things differently. And I hope that through people listening, they'll start to understand that we don't have to be in this huge machine. And even in being this machine, does it make you happy? And if it doesn't, then maybe you have to think about doing something different. But I'm
Or
circling back to you because
or just kind of like being different in the machine. Like, like there's a cog shaped place for you, but like you can maybe, yeah, try to make that, bring as much compassion into that cog
to that
as
machine. Yeah.
I I still love the job so much. And I love it even more now that I love myself, because I can be playful, or I can be compassionate, or I can listen. I can actually listen now that I'm not trying to solve in every moment.
Right.
And I used to teach my residents this a lot. It's like, if you can actually love, or you can actually be compassionate, it actually makes you faster. Paradoxically, if I come in and I'm like, hey, I'm here, I'm really listening to you, I'm really on your team, patients don't need to be so defensive. And so they actually trust that you are on their team because I really am. And then they begin to soften. And at least, I work in mostly inner city emergency rooms, a lot of overnight. And so it's, yeah, people are really feeling like they have to fight for themselves. When they know that I'm fighting for them, they don't have to fight.
Well, I think you have a lot of teaching that you need to do to some other ER physicians around here. But what was that aha moment for you that made you decide, you know what, I think I want to go to India?
Yeah, the India thing. All right.
Well, yes, that's where you are, right?
I'm actually, yeah, I'm in Rajasthan, a place called Pushkar in what the hell am I doing here?
You tell me.
I am trying to figure it out. So yeah, it kind of like goes on the back of this human curriculum. So we work with our inner narrative, and then we work with how to feel our emotions. The next step in that is, how do I have true love and presence in every moment? And I've been on kind of a spiritual path in parallel to my medical work. And this idea of realization, the concept of realization is, how am I completely present in just right now, so that every action I take is an authentic action that's pulled through from the present moment, from exactly what's needed. And I'm sure your listeners can relate to an idea of flow, or an idea of play, or an idea of love, where like in an act of love, or in an act of play or flow, you're not thinking necessarily. You're not in your mind like, what's next? And then how do I get, or how do I do the right thing? It's just like the 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 moment is moving you, and you are fully authentically there. And so I am in India meditating 6 to 8 hours a day, doing mantra and cold showers, and eating once a day. And it's all to kind of get to a place where I'm actually not using my mind almost at all. And when you're not thinking, you're just allowing. And, thoughts, again, going back to what thoughts are, it's like, this is past conditioning that's informing us of the present, but it can never be the true intelligence of the present. Like I can use memories, but I'm not associating with like these these like messengers, I guess, these like, because like, how often are our thoughts actually helping us. I mean, how often are our thoughts even correct? We spend a lot of energy with them, but they're not often on our side, or they're not often helpful. And so, yeah, I'm working on like, how do I stay present, open my heart to a place where I'm no longer driven by anything but my open authenticity and my love. And in that place, the division between me and you dissolves. The division between like the self or the ego, or like needing to protect, let's say protect, goes away. Yeah. And so what I'm doing here is I'm spending a few months playing with what does it mean to dissolve the self.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that sounds very interesting. Like I would love to talk to you when you get back 8 months
Okay. Yeah.
later to
Let's.
see like what has changed or what you've learned, how you've grown while you've been out there. I think it's amazing that you have the ability to be able to do that, because I think that, that there's always that question. It's like, what's stopping us from doing, following that path to go out there to do, or whether it's another place, what's stopping us? And I'd say most likely nothing, but we have our various different things that might say, I don't know if I could do that. For example, like I love to travel, but I would never travel alone. But maybe that's something I should try. But I would love to catch up with you to find out, what you've learned, if and how that might translate back into your practice. Are you planning on coming back and being an ER physician? That's the next question.
I've got some shifts in the spring, and
You do? Okay.
I'm in a hugely privileged position to. I paid off my loans. I don't have kids. I don't have like, you know, I, and I work in a system that pays well enough that I can leave for a few months. Not everyone is in that position, but using your time. I mean, I don't want to give anyone advice, but like, yeah, it's just, I could be doing anything. I could be hoarding money to buy a Mercedes, or I could be, yeah, moving to India to find enlightenment.
Right. It's I would say it's very admirable. And I hope that you do bring something back, because I think that there's a lot that, young learners can learn from you, other nurses or whoever you might interact with, your patients. Just looking at time, knowing that I have only a couple minutes left. If you could go back to speak to your younger self, or
Mm,
another resident, or, another learner or somebody else on your team, particularly when it comes to moral injury and burnout,
yeah,
what would be that one piece of advice that you would give that individual or yourself, your younger self?
yeah. Wow. I think it would just be to take some deep breaths and recognize, okay. I think we hear that and it sounds great. It sounds kind of trite. It sounds kind of patronizing. But man, I just felt like my world was on fire. And if I didn't take my tiny bucket and put it out, that I would burn down with it, I guess. And so just recognizing that it's not all up to me and that it's okay. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
no, I
wish I
think that's powerful.
had more years recognizing that.
No, I
Yeah.
think that's powerful and that's so important, because I think that we don't take that time. And I think that there's a lot of people that are feeling that way. I would say that just a lot of the conversations that I've been having in the last, 48 hours, there's a lot of people that are scared, a lot of people that are concerned, a lot of people that just feel like giving up, or saying, the situation globally or, economically is challenging. And I think that, sometimes it is just, you just need to take a deep breath and know that you'll be here the next day, and you continue just to try to do the best that you can. I wish someone gave me that advice when I was really struggling, because sometimes you do feel like you're on fire and there's nothing that can be put out. And I think that even just taking that moment to pause and to do, your 4 in, hold, and then your 4 out, I think it's so important, right? I think that I wish that mental health was seen as something really important in healthcare. We deal so much with the physical aspects of, like, we see that condition, that broken bone, or, that injury to the heart. It's so easily to be dealt with. But when it comes to the mind, we do such a poor job. And I feel I've always had this argument with some of my friends of like, what's more important, the heart or the mind? I would always say the mind, right? That's an argument for another day. But I do agree with you in terms of, sometimes it's just about taking that deep breath, giving yourself a minute, and then coming back to it. I think that we need to do that more often. Because I feel like if a lot of people took deep breaths versus to reacting, we might be in a different place right now. But again, thank you so much for coming on the Gritty Nurse podcast, for sharing your knowledge and your story with me. We'll have to know what happens next. And then, maybe even another conversation about some of the medications and things that you were talking about in terms of treatment. I actually haven't had anybody come on the podcast to talk about like psychedelics. I went to, like I mentioned, I went to a conference and I was hoping to have this individual who was, I believe, doing some piloting in Canada and the US about psychedelics, but I never got around to it. But I would love to have a conversation with you maybe another time about, that type of treatment, because again, I would say that is not a conversation that we hear often either. So again, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time. And I know it's super early there. I don't know if you probably have had breakfast, but maybe it's now time to have something else. So just thank you so much for coming on the Gritty Nurse podcast to speak with me.
Thank you, Amie. It was such a joy. Love to you and your father as you navigate these turbulent waters. And I look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Looking for a great gift for a nurse or someone who needs to learn about nursing? Check out my national best-selling book, The Wisdom of Nurses, Stories of Grit from the Bedside. Thank you so much for listening to The Gritty Nurse with Amie Archibald-Varley. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or any other podcast platform, please hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss out on any awesome episodes from The Gritty Nurse. Thank you so much and stay tuned until next time. Stay gritty.